All right.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hey
Morning,
guys.
morning. Another bright and sunny Wednesday.
Yes, sir. In the world of infosec, huh? Lots of lots of stuff going around.
Another day in
lots of good
paradise.
news. Lots of good news and lots of topics to cover, I think. So, yeah. All right. Sorry.
Yeah. So where to begin? I mean, we got Mimecast, we got Ubiquity, we got some updates from NTC
Yep.
Group and Fox IT. We got some more SolarWinds updates. The list keeps going bigger and bigger.
Yeah. I don't know, guys. What do you think? Maybe start with kind of SolarWinds. That's kind of a very hot topic. It seems to kind of be growing, day in, day out. New information is being released. Still kind of top of people's minds, I think, from a risk perspective and whatnot. So I don't know, Sammy, like, what have you kind of seen the last couple of days? I know you had some really good information you found out and were researching around.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I think one of the more recent things that popped up in the news cycle was the sealed U.S. court records that were exposed during the breach. I know there were a lot of sources that said that was due to the second stage of the Sunburst malware, Teardrop as they're dubbing it now. And so they were actually able to compromise some of the judiciary case management and electronic file systems. So really put a lot of non-public information at risk. And again, one of the many industries that or many organizations that have started to see the fallout from this hack. Not to mention, some of that data has actually started to become available on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, that's a terrifying thought, right? I mean, you have these sealed court records. They could be, private, or like these large kind of cases. They could be smaller ones. Who really knows? But the fact that some of these things are kind of getting out there and starting to kind of be sold or placed on quote unquote dark web and market. It's a very, very terrifying thing because now you're getting into privacy. There's tons of personal information about these types of cases and. Some people pay a lot of money to keep these things sealed forever, right? Because it could damage brands, reputations, future. So it's a very, very scary thing to kind of start seeing these things come out, right? With regards to what's really in those cases, and I think we're going to see more of these things kind of start to leak out as time goes on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of privacy concerns, like you mentioned, right? So it's going to obviously it's cross international borders. And so there'll be a lot of concern with that, along with the CCPA, GDPR. I mean, you can just go on and on and on with that list, right? So it'll definitely be interesting to see long term how all that plays out. And then will they actually, it's like ransomware, right? You go and the new thing there is they don't just paywall you, then they want the money not to give your data away, right? So there's that whole angle. From that perspective as well. So are they going to offer that as an opportunity to people to kind of cover that back up? But it all goes back to the basics. I know people don't like that term. I always bring it up. But it's just those basic things there. Like, why did you have internet on your server to start with type of thing? If you had that stuff locked down and more of a least trust type of scenario set up, you could have avoided a lot of that to start with.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of this, Sammy, like you're saying. This is kind of like our, kind of second stage, if you will, and, what's going to turn to that. And, this is kind of the underlying problem with a solution like this that has so many hooks into different parts of your network and servers that, it's really easy to kind of get around and move around laterally. And when things aren't segmented and, that kind of trust wall, if you will, is up in place, it makes things like this very, very scary and terrifying. And, I think we're going to see more of these things pop up in the news here as we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's particularly scary when so much of the industry is dependent on a particular vendor for their software, and there's not necessarily a lot of other alternatives. And that what that does is create less points of failure where, if you compromise a single point in the supply chain, you're able to affect a gigantic percentage of the industry. And so as a result of the supply chain attack, for those who don't know, by the way, there was some of the loot that was pillaged from the attackers during the attack has been made available online. And although the links have been removed for InfoSec forums, in Reddit and whatnot, it appears that the administrator who was involved in the Solar allows for the purchase of Microsoft, Cisco, and SolarWinds source code and repositories, as well as FireEye private red team tools. And so what that means for the industry is also of particular interest, because Cisco is another big name, and Microsoft they're highly, the industry is highly dependent on. And so if we start to see 0 days and backdoors developed on these common software that's leveraged, is SolarWinds just the beginning of a much larger, I guess, period of InfoSec where some of these giant vendors are riddled with vulnerabilities. And while that's always really been the case, I think the volume that we're going to see moving forward is going to be significant compared to what we've seen in the past. And so it brings up the question of, are we getting too dependent on certain vendors for our infrastructure? And maybe we should look to have different options, and maybe even for different parts of our infrastructure.
Yeah, very, very good point. I think to what you're saying is, if the SolarWinds kind of attack and everything got, so deep and everybody made off with, various source codes and, internal IP for, various companies and like these large manufacturers, now we're going to see this next wave of 0 days, exploits, things like that could really affect an even larger group of people, right? So I think, the whole kind of snowball thing here is starting to pick some speed up, and we're going to kind of start to see a lot of things come out in the next, 6+ months or so, maybe even less. To your point, one of the ones that was mentioned was Cisco. I mean, most networks run Cisco from the edge all the way to the internal. So, having a 0 day around that, or just a opportunity to kind of get in those networks, could open up a whole nother wave of attacks and access to these places that have never been seen before. So it's going to continue to kind of evolve here and get worse, in my opinion.
Yep, and I think the source code's a big issue because they could find a vulnerability and then sleep on it, right? It won't be that much different than what happened here in SolarWinds. They started September of 2019, and they just eased their way into it, right? So it wasn't something that happened overnight.
Right.
So I think that there's that use case there where they'll just sleep on these different vulnerabilities and attacks that they have and then come back. So, now's the time to start addressing all of that inside your environment, your network, on kind of what are you doing to watch for all that lateral movement that happens inside, not just the north-south traffic, but all that east-west traffic inside your environment. What are you doing to watch and protect that and find those anomalies?
Yeah, coming back to the whole people, process, technology type of play, right? Which I think is so important that, as you said, Brian, it's always like, basic things, but, they do make a huge difference in a lot of cases like this.
Absolutely, yeah. And I like to your point, I think, we have no idea just how deep or persistent their access is, and we really won't know until maybe for years to come. Like you said, that these could be in development. Researchers can have their hands on these for a while before they start to execute it in the wild. So that'll be a very interesting. It's not just, but the interesting thing as well is it's not just SolarWinds that's been the victim of some of these attacks recently. Like they have kind of dominated the recent news cycle, but they're certainly one of many. Mimecast, Ubiquity, or just to name a few, are some of the other ones that have been compromised in recent attacks. And those are quite interesting. The Mimecast one was really related to about 10% of their customers who were using Mimecast sync and recovery and continuity monitoring for IEP products to Microsoft 365 Exchange web services. And that appears to have been compromised by a significant threat actor. So although only about 10% of the customers were affected, still quite notable, and something that may have not have gotten as much coverage as maybe something like Sunburst, but still quite notable.
Yeah, I think to your point, that was another very, interesting kind of, play coming out of this, right? This, like you said, was a very sophisticated attack. Is targeting the certificates and how they do the authentication. Looking for a certain kind of key subset, and I think it's still pretty new in the findings, but we'll see, what information comes out of this one as well as to what level of access, the threat actors had with regards to these customers, right? Was it full email access? Was they, deeper into the network? So it's going to be another kind of interesting evolution here of what's coming out, in the whole real-time cybersecurity space around this one. So everything's kind of adding up, and 2021 is off to a very interesting start.
Yeah, and they didn't confirm that it was related to the Sunburst attack, but there are people who are hypothesizing that. So I'm curious to see when Mimecast release some statements surrounding that. But as of now, it seems to be an isolated incident.
Yeah, it makes me think too about the secure score or whatever that they have up in Office 365, and how most people, I mean, there's statistics released on it, and I think Microsoft even put some out there that just don't have some of those basics around those admin accounts. And so it's very easy to escalate your privilege up inside those environments. So it's just important to go back and just take a look, right? Go log in, take a look at what your score is, and find the areas that you need to remediate, because they give you the answers right there on the website, or reach out to a partner or somebody to help you get that stuff done if you're inundated with all your day-to-day tasks and you can't get these things knocked out. While they may seem very basic, they are things that you can get people to help you close those gaps and improve that security.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I think anything you can do, like even just basic things like you're saying, Brian, is, every little bit helps, right? I don't think there's going to be ever this, silver magic bullet you can just click a button or do. It's really this kind of ongoing, warfare, if you will, of, how do you evolve? How does a company evolve? How do they put more forethought into cybersecurity in general? How do you assign dollar amounts to risk? I think all these things are very important. And we're kind of starting to see that, I think, kind of shift, and also some of these boards, as well as, cybersecurity is less of an afterthought now and more of that, forward-facing, technology or group that, needs to be taken, I think very seriously, and, risk for the business and, brand reputation, monetary damages are real. So, I mean, you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, well, just thinking about 2021 and maybe like resetting, if you will, on those budgets, some thoughts around that. So definitely reallocating some expenses into the cybersecurity budget, whether that comes across the business and all the different units give up a little bit of budget that help with that, is one way. And then obviously looking at what you currently spend and what can be fine-tuned a little bit to look at some of these new products. Because as we all know, technology changes so fast. Right, there's a new iPhone released every year. There's a new Android released every 3 months, type of methodology. So it's always changing. It's getting better. It's getting faster. And maybe what you bought 3 years ago needs to be replaced now. Right. So those are some other options out there to look at. Like I remember I worked for a CIO that always said, just do the 1 year subscription, never do the 3 year. And I always never understood that, because it looked like it was always going to cost more. Right, over the total cost of ownership. But now with all these issues that have been occurring and breaches, it's like, well, maybe that philosophy is not so bad after all, right? Like we all know the next one can get hit too. But because the technology changes so fast, maybe you could switch out your antivirus and go with the next generation solution and things like that as well. So there's ways to find the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to mention, I think nowadays it's worth the additional spend to do some proactive security and do some threat research or threat hunting for that regard. Going out and not just assessing or reacting, but proactively looking for indicators that threat actors are mobilizing certain attack infrastructure to attack your infrastructure, or perhaps you're noticing certain attack vectors being employed. There are experts and platforms out there that can monitor for these changes and allow you to react way before this actually happened. There were actually some indicators of compromise following the Sunburst attack that could lead all the way back to I think it was March or April, that were identified by one of the platforms we use here at Triden Group. And so that was quite a lot of lead time to have, adjusted your infrastructure to account for that potential attack, or to even go ahead and perform remediation if there was that understanding of that threat. So I think that investment in some proactive research, proactive threat hunting is going to go a long way moving into 2021.
No, that's a great point, Sammy, because overall, each sector, each vertical that's out there has different threat vectors that they have to worry about or think about. And everybody's critical data is different as well. So those are different things to really consider, and then have somebody come in and attempt to go after that critical data and find what those vulnerabilities are.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, data is so, I don't know what's the right word, right? It's just so important now, that, it becomes these crown jewels that sometimes people forget. And to your point, data to me could be different than data to your company, but, they have to be protected and, secured, in a very, positive way. And it's interesting, actually, I was reading some stats about, like the whole job market. And I think we all know there's a massive shortage in cybersecurity. A lot of companies are talking about, planning to add jobs and whatnot, but a lot of the jobs that are being looked at are actually around data, right? So data intelligence, data management, data analysis, I think is kind of becoming, top of mind now to these boards and CISOs of, hey, like, what is really like my critical data? Like, is it this record over here? Is it my brand? Is it my, secret sauce and formula for this? Everyone kind of has to know what that is. They have to know where that lives, and have to really, essentially protect it at like all costs, right? Because, in the end, that's kind of what, make or break your business and what you actually do for profit. So it's very important.
Great point. Yeah, data is the new oil, I guess, is the phrase that I've always heard said.
Yep. Data is power. Yeah, and using that data to make, real-time decisions on, and just using machine learning in general to kind of just make real-time decisions on attack predictions and autonomously updating your security posture through DevSecOps. That really seems to be the way that the direction that we're heading as an industry. And it's good, right? Because then the responsibility models change, and you can leave a lot of that responsibility to big vendors, cloud service providers, and really focus on how your data is managed, how it's accessed, things like IAM policy, and then you can take a lot of the legwork off internally on making sure from a technical infrastructure perspective that things are sound. You're not going to completely be able to rid that burden completely, but with the way we're heading, that seems to be a model that can ensure long-term security efficiency.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Kind of having that, who has access to what access do they have, that whole kind of tried and true approach of, giving people the least possible privilege of access. And, days of giving everybody domain admin should be hopefully long gone. But sadly, I think we know that's not really the case. And even like you mentioned around, cloud, right? I mean, there's so many ways that, you can kind of get really, down the rabbit hole quickly with cloud, and without understanding the roles and responsibilities and how that kind of back end, APIs actually work. I think it's very important that we kind of have that base tier foundation of who, what, how they have access, and really monitor those things for account escalation, account creation. I think a lot of issues can be mitigated from, looking at those types of threats and alerts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of thinking about the cybersecurity shortage and stuff, what do you guys think is a good place or way for people to look for additional talent?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was, like I said, I was kind of doing some research on that and looking at what people have, kind of talked about from various kind of CISOs and whatnot. And a lot of them do plan to kind of hire within or promote within. So looking at ways to kind of take their talent pool, rise it, grow it, provide training, looking at ways to kind of gamify, training and things like that. I think that's a pretty kind of cool way to incentivize some of these engineers that have the right skill set, maybe like from an analytical communications, troubleshooting perspective. Because I think we all know there's a major shortage there, and it's hard to just kind of turn somebody into an expert overnight. These things take time. A lot of companies are actually looking at outsourcing and looking at MSPs. I was reading the stat that actually says about 90% either use or plan to use managed services providers because, for a company that's more, let's say, mid-size, right, that maybe doesn't have the budget or the staff to have a 12-person red team, so to speak, that's a little bit smaller, where you might have a couple of people running around wearing multiple hats. It's very easy to kind of miss things, and looking at outsourcing, I think, becomes a really surefire, quick way to get some kind of horsepower behind that team, and more eyes on glass, so to speak, and that true 24/7 and things like that. So
definitely. Well, I know MSPs in general have access or view into many different of their customers and different verticals, and they can bring
Right.
those assets and that value that they see, right? Because when you're in one organization, you see it one way, through one lens, if you will, versus multiple lenses.
right.
I know customer service centric folks seem to be doing really well coming in looking from a different view that don't have that technology background because they ask lots of good questions. So I've
Right.
seen success over the last couple of years where people that are non-technology driven come into these environments. Definitely military folks because they're trained in warfare, and so they got to go find that adversary and go hunt it down. So a lot of them have a great aspiration into cybersecurity in the private sector as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? They kind of have that mentality, that skill set, kind of very methodical approach, able to kind of really be analytical. So yeah, it's a great point, trying to hire our veterans and those that kind of served, and looking at cyber command, cyber warfare, or even just I think really in general that a lot of the military is kind of providing that network and security kind of foundation just across the board now, right? So there's a lot of really good talent out there that can, I think, kind of hit the ground running, and you said have that kind of mentality of what to look for and approaching things.
Totally, yeah, and I really think it comes back to that mentality, right? I've seen people with zero background in IT or information security become some of the best information security professionals because they really have that mindset to passionately keep learning, to think critically, to solve complex issues, but at the same time follow a strategic methodology and an approach to performing these assessments. I think as the education and the content that's available to the industry becomes more refined and more available, you'll start to see more individuals who would have not originally gone into InfoSec start to lean that direction, right? I mean, just since I've really been in the field, I've seen so many different organizations come up that provide great content, great material around certain topics, and really get you from zero to proficient in many different domains of security. So while there is a shortage, the beauty of it is there's a lot of different realms to go into, and now there's a lot of content to get you there. So I think what it comes down to is just looking for those passionate people who really want to learn about the industry. And to your point, it makes sense that the military is a great segue to making great InfoSec professionals, because the mindset are so similar. That OPSEC mindset, that methodical approach, as you were mentioning, right? Being able to analyze risk and make decisions based upon that. So to your point, Brian, I think time will help kind of bring those individuals, but help find those individuals. But the MSP route is also a great way to outsource some of that expertise, as these individuals spend a lot of time doing what they do.
Yep. I know that YouTube has been taking down some of the hacking type of videos and stuff like that. I've read that across different forums, etc. But there's some great websites that really help you get up and going, and a lot of them are free. Right, so you can go on there and get some hands-on experience trying to do some of these different type of level attacks, and a lot of them that are up there, they're all baked into the OS now to block them, if you will. So they dumbify it down so it'll let the attack occur, but it just teaches you, how simple that some of these attacks are, whether it's a SQL injection attack or doing some memory attacks and different things that you can do to grab credentials or Kerberos tokens and all that type of fun stuff, or even decrypting RSA keys, right? So some of them are 64-bit keys that are easy to break, if you will. And then, so anyways, lots of great resources up there for low cost. I know Udemy oftentimes has sales or even free ones that you can go get up to. I know one of my favorite places to get news and updates is on Reddit. And there's a NetSet group and there's a cybersecurity group that you can join as well to keep an eye on and see when these things pop up, etc. So great point on the training.
There's so much training content now, and even just from where it was 5-10 years ago. I know like when I kind of first started, it was like no concept of half the stuff. You got to build your own labs and scour random forums and just literally hack your way through it and figure it out. And now you can pretty much learn anything on the fly, and there's great content, amazing teachers. So I think it's awesome to find people that can be so curious and they want to learn and grow. And we have that kind of really big mindset here at Triden Group of like always learning and pushing the team to kind of grow and do things and really kind of get people out of their comfort zone. And that's how things are going to happen, right? I mean, the industry is changing almost overnight with cloud and SaaS, and traditional models have to evolve as well, and that means that traditional talent has to kind of morph and perform as well. So a lot of engineers are up to the challenge, and they want to kind of constantly grow and have that curiosity mindset to really learn and drive new things, which is just awesome to see.
Definitely. So we do have a question that came in on LinkedIn here. So it's from Victoria. So thank you, Victoria, for watching today and posting and interacting. So does TG Secure Pro recommend manufacturers to remedy the breaches that are out there?
Yeah, good question. And for those of you that don't know, TG Secure Pro is a security assessment as a service solution where you're able to select from a menu of assessments to perform throughout the year. And in that assessment, to answer your question, Victoria, there are a lot of, in that solution, there are a lot of types of assessments where it'll actually analyze the environment to understand commonly known vulnerabilities or even uncommon vulnerabilities. And a part of that would be looking for things that were related to certain breaches. For example, the sunburst vulnerability. If that's something like that is discovered, then absolutely we would recommend to certain clients or manufacturers to patch or remediate the issue. So TG Secure Pro does, in fact, make recommendations to manufacturers on how to remediate certain breaches.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's definitely different incident response capabilities and things like that that we can engage and interact with to help customers through a breach should one occur.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of note that it's having that plan, understanding what your plan is, for one, having a plan to start, and then kind of executing what these plans are. I think we're going to see more and more of this, right, as people do that, those kind of soft exercises, and really focus on those three people, process, and technology kind of pillars. And it's not going to be just one specific bucket, if you will, to solve all these things. But these are definitely great things to look at holistically and help secure your network as you go.
Definitely. So I know we're coming up here on our 30-minute time block. So I think we're shooting to do this twice a month on Wednesdays here at the noon slot.
Correct.
So we look forward to being back here in 2 weeks.
Yep, that's right. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about in 2 weeks. Every day something new.
The show goes on, as they say.
That's right. There'll be plenty of information to cover next time as well. Well, thank you guys for joining all of us today and learning more about all these current events and attacks that are out there. And hopefully we provided you some good value on how you can help remediate some of this as well. So feel free to keep the conversation going on LinkedIn. Reach out to us. Communicate over a private message if you like.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Have
everybody.
a great day. Thanks, guys.